Homefront. We have Dave Batipka here, who's from Chaos Studios, to talk to us about the game. Now, Dave, we know that Homefront takes place in 2027. North Korea has invaded America. How does that happen?
Right, so that's what the high premise is for Homefront, Occupation USA, essentially. So we've spent a lot of time working on that backstory, and what essentially happens is North Korea, who certainly the regime there has the will to do this, right? They don't currently have the way, but that's how what the backstory sets up. So there's a friendly unification of South Korea and North Korea. Japan eventually comes into the mix, as well as some Southeastern Asian countries. And what that really gives them is, Western military technology, ICBM, satellite technology, and a hell of a lot of manpower, right? So this occupation starts in the year 2025. They set off an EMP blast that's hidden in a satellite that they've launched. And the game actually kicks off 2 years into that occupation.
So we're looking at, I guess, a section in the game right now. Can you talk us through it? Where are we at in the game?
So this is the beginning of the second chapter of the game. You wake up. This is Boone, a squad leader, who's leading you through this resistance headquarters, this household. And our premise can really be described by this term, the familiar has become alien. So you can see here that America has been twisted. It's been twisted by occupation. It's been twisted by sort of the collapse of America, by energy crisis, and that's all reflected in what the resistance is doing here. So in the middle of this abandoned suburbs, because I'll explain a little more why they're abandoned in a little bit, but you can see there's these 3 backyards. They're covered by a camo scrim to avoid detection from the KPA. And there's women and children here. This is not just a game about combat set in America. This is a game about experiencing what occupied America would actually be like. So as he leads you through here, you can see that there's homeschooling going on. The guy in the back there is a tinkerer. He's fixing a lot of parts that have been damaged by the EMP strike. No shortage of things to fix in this world. And Boone explains to you, we're covered by the camo scrims. We got solar panel and windmills to give us the power, and they're completely self-sufficient in this little hideout here.
So this is how they have to live under this invasion, is that right?
Right, that's right. And this is really a side of the game we really want to deliver on and let players explore, is how did the civilians adapt to this occupation, and how did life change for Americans? Because whenever you hear about occupation, you see it on the news and oppression. It's always happening to other people, across the world. But what if it was happening on America's doorstep? And that's really the high premise behind Homefront.
Because these people they're not army, they're not special forces or anything, are they? They're just normal resistance fighters, is that right?
That's right, they're actually civilians turned freedom fighters, and you're fighting alongside them, all fighting for this cause, The army, the military has been fractured. As part of the backstory, I'll explain it when we see the map here, but the Mississippi was irradiated, so it's just a radiation wasteland, and it's essentially split the country in two. Now, we're not saying that the North Koreans, it's actually a greater Korean republic that it's grown into, has occupied the entire country. There's still an American government, there's still an American military. They've seized Hawaii, they've seized San Francisco, and they have key parts of the U.S., which you can see on this map here. This is what the resistance knows so far.
That's a big nuclear waste zone in the middle there, is that right?
So that's the Mississippi River there. They don't have a lot of information what's going on in the East Coast, but those circles are suspected locations where the KPA are. Obviously, they would have went after military bases in key states. So their philosophy really is to establish a foothold. Kind of like the smallest germ can kill the largest giant. Once it's been placed in there, then it can spread and grow.
So who are you in the game?
So you're a former Marine pilot. You actually begin the game trying to be recruited by the Koreans as well as by the resistance for your piloting skills. And your skills come into play later in the game, and there are vehicles in this game as well. So you're really going to sort of live up to your needs and your reputation. You're sort of you don't talk in the game. It's fairly Gordon Freeman style, as is the in-game storytelling. We're going to try to avoid or are avoiding cutscenes in the game. It's all delivered narratively in the game as you walk through these environments. And when you explore this level in particular, each of these characters will give you information about what they're doing. So this guy, a Stairmaster, was hooked up so he doesn't have to carry water by hand anymore. It's pumped throughout the area. You can see there's livestock and agriculture going on here.
So this basically is your goal here to, I guess, try and make people, be more involved in the story. Like you're not just fighting, just for yourself or for a nameless cause. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like the places you grew up, suburbs, places you shop, places you raise your children, how have they been transformed, and how did regular, everyday, ordinary people adapt to this occupation? If you don't explore that side of it, you're not going to get any of the emotional depth that we want to deliver. You know, if you only deal with the combat, you're just missing out on one of the most intriguing parts of the whole premise.
But there is obviously, this is a shooter, so there'll be obviously combat coming up, is that right?
Yeah, we're about to see that pretty quickly here. So as you can see, Resistance have dug some tunnels to get them in and out of this area, which is essentially an oasis that they have, or their HQ. So as we go through this tunnel, we're going to jump ahead to the next chapter in the game. It's kind of like 12 hours later in the campaign, and we're going to pick up in this mission partway through.
Now, you are in the future. This is set in 2027. Does that mean you've got some pretty futuristic weapons at your disposal?
Yeah, it's a little different because you're not conventional military. You're scrounging for whatever you can get from the enemy. You have done, in sort of the backstory, some raids on military bases, and you do acquire this one weapon in particular, which is the Goliath autonomous combat vehicle, which we're going to see here shortly. Yeah. And so there's a bit of a future weapons twist. Another piece of equipment that you acquire, you're going to see at the beginning of this level. I don't want to give it away before it goes off. Yeah. But the Resistance has to sort of pick up and scrounge and gather what they can. One thing to note about this combat sequence as well is it's reflective of the Resistance position in the game. In a lot of shooters, you're this large military force with all the equipment you could ever dream of. In this one, you're outnumbered, you're outgunned, you have to get in quickly and get out.
And what are we seeing now? This is the start of that mission, is that right?
Right, so we've jumped into this mission partway through. This is a squad mate of yours, Rihanna. She chokes out this Korean guard, and now she's going to lead you onto this rooftop.
Oh, I see, yeah. Okay, so where are we at here?
All right, so we're on an overwatch position for the raid that's about to occur. You see there's a lumber liquidator store in the background. To the right, there's a Hooters, and we're really trying to focus on real brands and making it a real America. So as he comes down here, you can hear her say, like, there's a lot of them in there, and really that's part of it. You're outnumbered, so you need to figure out a way from a guerrilla tactics standpoint, how is the Resistance going to assault this place? So it starts off with this decoy by bringing the band in, which is playing some Hunk of Burnin' Love by Elvis. It draws in the North Koreans here, and then you'll see what happens in a second.
Okay. Now that's quite a nice touch there. I understand that you actually have some pretty big riders. Actually, wait, we'll see what's happening right now.
All right, so this is a white phosphorus flare. It's a pretty nasty weapon against the Geneva Convention type of thing, but the Resistance, one thing we really want to do is they need to be ruthless. And we've been working with John Milius, as you mentioned. He's done a lot of writing and direction for us to really help us bring this world to life. He's the writer-director of Apocalypse Now and Red Dawn. And he's really guided us a lot. And a lot of these ideas here were his, actually. The Elvis and the band coming in and, using the white phosphorus as a guerrilla tactic.
Just for folks who don't know, what is white phosphorus? What does it do to you?
So essentially it's like a hot burning chemical, I believe based on magnesium partly, and it'll burn through pretty much anything. So it's a little more inflammatory. They put it in these mortar shells, and they've been launching it into here to gain the upper hand and try to let them get into the store.
And right now I see you're providing some sniper support, is that right?
So you're providing an overwatch sniper support as the battle rages below. And then any second here there's going to be a misfire. So this is part, your civilian force. Mistakes happen, things go wrong, and here's an example of that. But where there's a misfire in the mortar, the white phosphorus goes over you.
Ouch.
You fly off the roof, and then Rihanna's going to get you up, and you're going to have to run like hell through this burning inferno.
Oh, man. Okay.
Another thing we do in the game is it's a design philosophy and a tool set that we call the drama engine. And what's purpose is to basically continuously deliver dramatic and intense immersive moments to the player as they play through the game. You're going to see some examples of that here. And also you're going to see some examples of when the emotional depth meets this all-out action. How do they combine? And as we go through this, so there's these scripted moments. Some of them are procedural. Some of them are just a sort of the philosophy we use to keep plugging the player with these intense
But
moments.
stuff's always going to happen close to you, basically, is that right?
Yeah, and it's kind of like a slot machine model. When you're playing slots, you always earn a little bit here and there, and it flashes lights and it pings you, and it's constantly getting your attention and keeping you engaged, and that's kind of how we're structuring our action sequences.
Okay, so you found a safe spot here now, is that right?
Right, so you've run through the fire, you're undercover in this tower. Maybe you can hear what they're talking about. Connor's essentially, saying, okay, we got to wait, let the phosphorus burn off. And Rihanna has a very human moment. She's like, Connor, this is all screwed up. Our people are burning down there. And he has to sort of get her back, or her head back in the game. And it's this kind of, these human moments, you don't really, it's kind of absent in the FPS genre right now, you know?
Okay, well that calm didn't last very long at all.
No, of course not. So the heli attacks.
Okay.
We have this dramatic tower fall sequence.
Because right now you're still, you know, very outnumbered, right? Even though you launched that white phosphorus, there's still a lot of soldiers around there, is that right?
Yeah, there's you do have other resistance cells that are with you in this mission fighting, but generally the odds are certainly against you. And then we'll see when Goliath comes in here. This is the autonomous combat vehicle that the resistance has. It's another tool they have to help even the odds.
And this is cool. I have seen this before.
Right, so the way it works is it's based on real military technology. It's autonomously driven. He's able to find his own navigation points, and he's able to target enemies with his machine gun. But you can also give him targets with his rocket system. One thing we put in the game is these EMP rounds. That's sort of Goliath's weakness. He's temporarily disabled. So you can see that Chris targeted some enemies there. You can lock onto multiple infantry or vehicles.
So how are you painting those enemies for Goliath?
Yeah, so you're hitting up on the D-pad and it brings up this Goliath targeting device. And then you lock onto them, pull the right trigger, and he fires his rockets.
And those rockets that we see going off, they're the EMP rockets that you're talking about.
And that's the gameplay sort of puzzle here. As if you let those EMP guys keep taking them out, the Korean forces are going to be advancing on you. It's going to get harder and harder. So it's really in your interest to take out those EMP shooters as soon as possible. Because when Goliath gets back in the fight, then you suddenly gain the upper hand for a minute again.
Okay. It seems like a pretty awesome weapon. How much would you have Goliath during the game, do you think?
He's a pretty big feature. I kind of think of him as your sidekick through the single player campaign. He's not going to be in every mission, but specifically in big battles like this, because there's a range of battles. Sometimes you're on the run and you're being hunted and things like that. But for the planned assaults and so on, and even for some of the sort of escape sequences, you'll get to use it.
Now, what type of firepower is it actually firing? Because it seems to be was that like tank it just blew up, or?
That was a Humvee, actually.
Oh, okay,
It's like a light armor vehicle, yeah.
Yeah, so it's packing some pretty serious heat, yeah?
Yeah, so it's got machine guns and a 4-barrel mortar launcher, rocket launcher on it.
Okay, all right. So what's happening now in this level?
All right, so you push them back, and then this heli has just come in. Now Chris is going to run up and target the helicopter with Goliath.
Okay.
So you're using Goliath to take it down, and this is the sort of ending climax of the demo.
Okay. So can we take it that wasn't the end of the game, right? That was you.
That was the. It wasn't actually even the end of the chapter. You're actually going to fight through the store, and you have a key mission in the game. Your overall mission in the game is to capture some fuel trucks in Colorado, and then get that fuel to San Francisco, where you meet up with the military and some other resistance cells for this big strike back on Korean-controlled San Francisco. And in the back of that store is where those fuel trucks are temporarily being housed just for the evening. So that's why this mission is so important.
Now, of course, every modern shooter has a multiplayer component. Are you talking about that yet? Like, what do you got planned?
Yeah, multiplayer is a huge focus for us. It's obviously a very strong heritage of the studio. It's going to be, we're not getting into too many details yet. We're going to start talking later in the summer about it. But it's going to be a large-scale warfare experience. Thematically, you can kind of think of it as the skirmishes that happen between the U.S. military and the Korean military. Tanks, helicopters, all that good stuff. And some great gameplay innovations we're going to roll out as well.
Let's go back to your writer here. You did mention John Milius. So for people who don't know, he's a dude that wrote Red Dawn, right?
Red Dawn, Apocalypse Now, yeah. Conan, like he's basically a legend in Hollywood.
So did you approach him, or like how did the relationship work there?
It's an interesting story. So I'd been wanting to do an Occupation USA game for some time, and Red Dawn was one of my inspirations. Watching these little streets, that had a little bank of the USA and these mom and pop shops, but then there was Russian soldiers there and barbed wire, and it's like, that's not supposed to be happening in this country. And that was sort of really the genesis of The Familiar Becomes Alien. So we'd been working on the concept of Homefront very early on, and Danny Bilson came on to THQ, and he's like, yeah, John Milius is my writing teacher, and I've worked with him for years. Do you want me to put him on the project? I'm like, really? That was amazing. So that's how it kind of kicked off.
Now, I understand you guys are also going to be fleshing out the story in Homefront in other forms of media, not just in the game itself. So what are you planning there?
Yeah, so Danny, again, brings a lot of transmedia interest. We're talking about novels and all sorts of different things. I don't think that we're announcing anything yet, but we're certainly exploring, because Homefront, the premise is just, there's so much there to work with that we want to explore it in as many ways as we can.
Is it too early to talk sequels yet? Because you're just getting to San Francisco. Where's the rest of the army?
Yeah, well, the Army exists obviously in the US, but they've been scattered by an EMP blast. In the more detailed backstory, there's actually a cyber attack that targets military systems, brings down things like the global transportation network so they can't coordinate forces. So it exists, but in a fractured state, and then those battles is what you really explore in the multiplayer side of it.
And once again, we talked about, it's a unified Korea, but it's North Korea to begin with. I think we actually have to wrap it up now, but just real quick on North Korea. It's kind of scary right now what's happening there. Does that lend your game any more credence, do you think?
Well, it's really uncanny. Last year at E3, they started doing nuclear testing just before the show. And this year, they just made a move in their parliament where Kim Jong-un is basically being positioned, which happens in our story as well. And there was the sinking of the Cheonan, which we worked into our backstory trailer. So I don't know if they're reading our backstory or what, but they're very cooperative.
I hope they're not reading your backstory.
I hope not.
Can you tell us when Homefront is coming out and what consoles we can expect it on?
It's going to be early 2011, Xbox, PS3, and PC.
Okay, look, David Dibka, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to head back to the show floor now, but make sure you stick around because we've got a really big game at the end of the day, so stick around.